The security badge was still warm in his hand when David Harris vanished from Trump Tower in Midtown Manhattan, New York City, population 8.5 million. The early morning of March 14, 2019, arrived with the dull hum of Fifth Avenue traffic and the faint glow of dawn reflecting off the tower's golden facade. At 4:23 a.m., David's shift supervisor, Jerry Portman, saw him through security monitors walking across the marble lobby toward the service elevator, his navy blue concierge uniform pressed sharp, his employee badge clipped neatly to his chest. David moved with the steady confidence of a man who'd worked every overnight shift for the past 4 years without missing a single night. That was the last image anyone captured of him. When Jerry checked the cameras again 14 minutes later, the lobby was empty. David Harris was gone. His locker remained locked, his wallet and keys untouched inside. His coat still hung on the rack. But David himself had vanished as if he'd simply dissolved into the air. What started as a missing persons report would, 7 years later, become one of the strangest mysteries in New York City history, and force investigators to ask a question no one had considered. Who was David Harris? And more terrifyingly, did he ever really exist at all? Before diving into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on the latest cases. Chapter 1. The Invisible Man, March 2019. Trump Tower rose like a monument to excess over Fifth Avenue, its bronze-tinted windows catching the city lights and throwing them back into the Manhattan darkness. Even at 4 a.m., New York pulsed with stubborn life. Yellow cabs prowled the empty streets like urban predators. Delivery trucks groaned toward loading docks, their diesel engines rattling the pre-dawn quiet. Steam billowed from subway grates, ghostly in the cold March air that carried the sharp smell of wet asphalt and yesterday's rain. Inside the tower's marble lobby, beneath a chandelier that cost more than most Americans earned in a lifetime, David Harris stood at his post. Navy blue uniform, gold name badge, hands folded, expression neutral. For 4 years, he'd been the perfect employee, the kind managers praised and co-workers forgot the moment he left the room. David Harris, 32 years old, worked the graveyard shift, Tuesday through Saturday, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. In 4 years and 2 months, he'd never been late, never called in sick, never taken a vacation day, never requested time off, never once broke protocol or caused his supervisors a moment's concern. Jerry Portman, his shift supervisor, used to joke about it. You could set your watch by Harris. Guy's more reliable than the subway schedule, and that's saying something in this city. Later, when investigators pressed Jerry to describe David, he would remember that joke, and he would feel sick. But on this particular March night, Jerry had no reason to worry. He sat in the second-floor security control room, surrounded by monitors showing every corner of Trump Tower in high definition: lobby, hallways, parking garage, loading dock. He'd worked this building for 12 years. He knew every camera angle, every blind spot, every quirk of the system. He prided himself on reading people, spotting the drunk resident before they stumbled, identifying the delivery person who didn't belong, sensing trouble before it started. David Harris, Jerry had concluded, was the simplest read of all. No complications, no drama, just a quiet guy doing his job, the kind of guy who blends into the wallpaper. Their interactions never went beyond the professional minimum. Evening, Jerry. Evening, David. Maybe a comment about the weather. Sometimes Jerry would mention his daughter's soccer games, fishing for engagement, but David would just nod politely and change the subject to work schedules or delivery protocols. Looking back, Jerry would realize he'd never once heard David laugh, never seen him smile, Never caught him on his phone, texting a friend, or checking social media during slow moments. But that night, nothing seemed unusual. David moved through his routine with mechanical precision, just like always. Logged in at 11:15 p.m., neat signature in the shift report. First security round at 11:30 p.m., taking the service stairs to check the residential floors. Back to the desk at midnight. Another notation in the logbook. At 2:30 a.m., a food delivery arrived. Late-night sushi order for someone on the 58th floor, one of the ultra-wealthy insomniacs who treated 3 a.m. like dinner time. David signed for it, verified the order against the building's pre-approved list, and personally escorted the delivery person up and back down. 8 minutes, start to finish. Professional, efficient, forgettable. Every movement captured by dozens of high-definition cameras, time-stamped, encrypted, stored on servers in the basement data center. Until 4:23 a.m., Jerry sat in the control room nursing his third coffee of the shift, only half watching the monitors. His mind had wandered to his daughter's upcoming birthday. She wanted a new bike, which meant he'd need to pick up an extra shift, and that leak in his bathroom that was getting worse. He'd missed the Mets game yesterday. His fantasy baseball team was tanking. The mundane thoughts of a man whose job was mostly boredom, punctuated by occasional excitement. On Monitor 7, David crossed the lobby toward the service elevators. Timestamp, 4:23:17 a.m. His walk was unhurried, posture straight, face expressionless. He pressed the call button, waited. The doors opened. He stepped inside. The doors closed. Jerry glanced at his phone, scrolling through box scores. A minute ticked by, then 2. At 4:25 a.m., Jerry's gaze flicked to Monitor 12, the basement camera. Empty hallway, harsh fluorescent lights. No David. Jerry frowned. The service elevator took 30 seconds, max. David should have appeared by now, probably in one of the storage rooms, out of frame. It happened. But at 4:30 a.m., David still hadn't reappeared. At 4:35 a.m., Jerry sat up straighter, switching between camera feeds. Basement hallway, empty. Storage room A, door closed, dark. Loading dock, nothing but shadows and parked trucks. Mechanical room, silent machinery. At 4:37 a.m., unease crept up Jerry's spine like cold fingers. He grabbed his radio. "Harris, you copy?" Static hissed back at him. "David, this is Portman. What's your location?" More static. Jerry stood, grabbed his flashlight and master keys, told himself he was overreacting. David's radio battery probably died, or he'd stepped into one of the mechanical rooms where the signal didn't reach. Simple explanation, but as Jerry descended the service stairs, his unease metastasized into something closer to dread. The basement was a concrete labyrinth painted institutional beige, lit by flickering fluorescence that cast sickly yellow shadows. It smelled of dust and machine oil. Pipes groaned overhead. Somewhere in the distance, the building's heating system clanked and hissed. "David?" Jerry's voice echoed off bare walls. "You down here, man?" Silence answered him. He checked the storage area. Neat shelves, stacked with supplies, everything organized, untouched. No David. Loading dock, cold air, locked garage door, empty pallets stacked against the wall. No David. Mechanical rooms, electrical closets, every space his keys could open. He called David's name until his throat went raw, until the echoes became mocking. Nothing. At 5:30 a.m., Jerry did something he'd never done in 12 years of working Trump Tower. He called the building manager at home. Richard Chen answered on the fourth ring, voice thick with interrupted sleep. "This better be good, Jerry." "David Harris is missing." Pause. "What do you mean, missing?" "I mean he went into the service elevator at 4:23 and never came out. I've torn the basement apart. He's not here." Jerry heard rustling, Chen getting out of bed. "Give me 20 minutes." By 6 a.m., both men had searched the basement twice. Then they thought to check David's locker. Maybe he'd gone to grab something, somehow slipped past the cameras. Stranger things had happened. The locker was still locked. Chen had bolt cutters brought up from maintenance. When the lock snapped and they opened the door, they found everything David should have taken when he left. Wallet with $43 cash, debit card, driver's license. Keys on a plain metal ring, apartment, mailbox, car, black wool overcoat. Even his phone, an old flip model, powered off, sitting on the shelf. David Harris had left behind every piece of evidence that he existed. At 7:15 a.m., with early rising residents beginning to filter through the lobby, Richard Chen made the call to the NYPD. Detective Michael Torres arrived at Trump Tower at 8:30 a.m., badge on his belt, notebook in hand. 43 years old, 15 years on the force, graying at the temples with permanent worry lines etched around his eyes. He'd worked hundreds of missing persons cases, enough to know that most resolved themselves within 48 hours, usually with mundane explanations. But something about this one bothered him from the start. Maybe it was the setting. Trump Tower, with its gold-plated everything and residents who could buy their way out of most problems. Maybe it was Jerry Portman's haunted expression as he showed Torres the security footage. Or maybe it was just instinct, that little voice in the back of his mind that whispered, "This one's different." They sat in the control room, Torres leaning forward to study the monitors as Jerry replayed the morning's recordings. Torres watched David Harris cross the lobby at 4:23 a.m. The man's body language revealed nothing. No hesitation, no nervous glances, no awareness that these would be his final recorded moments. He simply walked to the elevator as naturally as breathing. The doors closed at 4:23:31 a.m. David disappeared. "Elevator goes to the basement, loading dock and sub-basement mechanical room," Jerry explained. "We've checked all three, multiple times. He's not there." Torres requested access to every camera in the building. For the next 3 hours, he and 2 uniformed officers reviewed footage from every angle, tracking David's movements throughout the night. Entering through the employee entrance at 11:07 p.m., logging in, making rounds, accepting deliveries, crossing the lobby. After 4:23 a.m., David Harris ceased to exist on camera. He didn't exit through any door, didn't appear in any hallway, didn't take any stairwell. He simply stopped. "Show me the elevator interior," Torres said, "the moment before he disappears." Jerry pulled up the feed. Interior camera showed David entering at 4:23:17 a.m., pressing the basement button. He stood quietly, face forward, as the elevator descended. At 4:23:47 a.m., the doors opened to an empty basement hallway. And at 4:23:51 a.m., David turned toward the rear wall of the elevator, toward the camera, and the feed cut to black. Torres felt his pulse quicken. "What happened there?" "Camera went offline," Jerry said quietly. "Came back 30 seconds later. Elevator was empty." "Malfunction?" "We checked the system logs." Jerry's voice had gone flat, the tone of someone who'd already reached an impossible conclusion. "The camera didn't malfunction. Someone turned it off. From inside the elevator." The hair on the back of Torres's neck stood up. Someone who knew where the camera was. Someone who knew how to disable it. Someone who'd planned this. This wasn't a panicked disappearance. This was an exit strategy. "I need to talk to everyone who knew him," Torres said. Over the next 2 hours, Torres interviewed 12 Trump Tower employees, 2 concierges from other shifts, 4 security guards, 3 maintenance workers, 2 housekeepers, the building manager. Every interview followed the same pattern. Torres asked about David Harris's personality, his habits, his relationships, and every person gave the same response: polite, quiet, professional. Did his job well. But beyond that, nothing. No one knew where he was from, what he did in his free time, whether he had family or friends or a girlfriend. No one had ever seen him upset or excited or anything other than calmly neutral. Maria Santos, a housekeeper who'd worked at Trump Tower for 8 years, put it best. He was like one of those robots at the airport, the ones that clean the floors. You see them every day, but you never really notice them. That was David. Torres underlined that in his notebook 3 times. "Where did he live?" Torres asked Jerry. "Queens, I think. He mentioned Astoria once, maybe? I asked about his commute one time, and he just said, 'Could be worse.' That was it. David didn't do small talk." Torres pulled David's employment file from Richard Chen's office. Thin folder, photocopy of a driver's license, W-4 form, background check authorization, employment application in neat handwriting, name, David Michael Harris, date of birth, April 7th, 1987, address, 37-12, Steinway Street, Apton 4B, Astoria, Queens, previous employment, none listed, education, high school diploma. Emergency contact, none. Torres stared at that last line. "He didn't list anyone?" Chen nodded. "I noticed when we hired him. Asked about it. He said he didn't have family, orphan, foster care background. When I pressed about friends or anyone we could notify in an emergency, he said he'd just moved to New York and didn't know anyone yet. I felt bad for the guy, so I let it go." "That was 4 years ago," Torres said slowly. 4 years, 2 months. 4 years in New York City, and David Harris hadn't made a single friend, hadn't formed a single connection worth writing down on a form. Torres had seen lonely people before. It was an occupational hazard of his job, but this felt different. This felt deliberate. He dispatched Officers Chen and Rodriguez to the Astoria address immediately. While he waited, Torres pulled up security footage from previous nights, comparing David's patterns. On March 13th, David had gone to the basement at 4:26 a.m., returned 9 minutes later. March 12th, same routine at 4:18 a.m. Every night showed the same pattern. David made a late-shift trip to the basement, usually between 4 and 4:30 a.m., and always came back, except tonight. Torres's instincts were screaming now. This wasn't random. This wasn't impulsive. Someone had planned this down to the minute. At 10:47 a.m., his phone rang. Officer Chen, calling from Astoria. "Detective, we're at the apartment. You should see this yourself." "What did you find?" A pause. I don't know how to describe it. Just come." Torres arrived at 37-12 Steinway Street 40 minutes later. 4-story brick building, probably 1960s construction, weathered but maintained. The kind of place working-class families called home for generations, protected by rent stabilization from Manhattan's relentless gentrification. Officer Chen met him at the entrance, looking unsettled. "4th floor. You'll understand when you see it." They climbed the narrow stairwell, no elevator, emerging into a dimly lit hallway that smelled of someone's cooking and old carpet. Apartment 4B was at the end, door propped open with a police evidence kit. Torres stepped inside. The apartment was tiny, maybe 300 square feet. A studio that served as bedroom, living room, and kitchen all in one cramped space. Small bathroom visible through an open door, but the size wasn't what stopped Torres in his tracks. It was the emptiness. Not empty of objects. There was furniture. A bed, neatly made with white sheets. A small table and single chair. A lamp. A narrow closet. A kitchenette with a 2-burner stove and mini-fridge. The walls were beige, the floor scuffed linoleum, the single window looking out onto a brick wall across an alley. But there was nothing personal, No photographs, no books, no mail, no television or computer, no decorations. The walls were completely bare except for a clock that had stopped at 11:17, its battery dead. Officer Chen opened the closet. 4 Trump Tower uniforms in dry cleaning plastic, 3 white shirts, 2 pairs of black pants, 1 pair of worn sneakers, 1 overcoat. That was it. No casual clothes, no jeans or gym clothes, no winter jacket or summer shorts. Nothing that suggested David Harris had a life outside his work uniform. Torres moved to the kitchenette. Mini fridge contained expired milk, moldy bread, 2 withered apples. The cabinet held 1 plate, 1 bowl, 1 mug, 1 glass, 1 set of utensils. In the bathroom, generic soap, half-empty shampoo bottle, toothbrush, single towel. No medications, no cologne, no razor, though David had been clean-shaven in all the footage. Officer Rodriguez emerged from the bathroom. No prescriptions, no mail, no trash. It's like a movie set, something pretending to be an apartment. Torres ran his finger along the table's edge. No dust. Someone had been here recently, keeping up appearances, but they hadn't been living here, not in any meaningful sense. This was a safe house, a cover, a prop in whatever long game David Harris had been playing. "Bag everything," Torres said quietly. "I want DNA from that toothbrush, prints from every surface, and get me the superintendent. I want to know when David moved in, how he paid rent, who saw him coming and going." As his team worked, Torres stood in the center of that barren studio and felt the case shifting beneath his feet. This wasn't a missing person. This was something else entirely. At 2 p.m., Torres sat at his desk in Midtown North Precinct, organizing his thoughts around bad coffee. The facts stacked up like puzzle pieces from different boxes. David Harris had worked at Trump Tower for 4 years without incident. He lived in a Spartan apartment that felt staged. He had no emergency contacts, no apparent friends, no social media presence. He'd vanished by deliberately disabling a security camera from inside an elevator. He'd left behind his wallet, keys, phone, everything that identified him. Torres pulled up the National Crime Information Center database and entered David's information, flagging him as missing under suspicious circumstances. Then he requested a full background check. Social Security verification, employment history, credit report, DMV records, criminal background. The results came back within the hour. And when Torres read them, his blood went cold. The Social Security number on David Harris's employment application belonged to a child. David Michael Harris, born April 7, 1987, in Fort Worth, Texas. Died November 3, 1987. 6 months old. Cause of death: sudden infant death syndrome. The man who'd worked at Trump Tower for 4 years had been living under a dead baby's identity. Torres stared at the screen, his mind racing through possibilities. Identity theft was common. People stole Social Security numbers to escape debt, avoid criminal records, start fresh. But this was different. This was someone who'd built an entire false life, maintained it with perfect discipline for years, then vanished the moment they decided it was time. This was professional. Torres picked up his phone and dialed the FBI field office in Manhattan, because whatever David Harris had been doing in that building, whatever he'd been watching, documenting, waiting for, it was beyond the scope of a missing persons case. It was beyond anything Torres had encountered in 15 years of police work. As he waited for the FBI agent to answer, Torres couldn't shake a single thought. He wasn't searching for a missing man. He was searching for a ghost, someone who'd never truly existed in the first place, someone who'd slipped into a borrowed identity, played a role for 4 years, then dissolved back into whatever shadows had spawned him. The man who never was. And somewhere out there, that man was watching, waiting. moving to the next phase of whatever plan had brought him to Trump Tower in the first place. The question wasn't where David Harris had gone. The question was why he'd been there at all. Chapter 2. The Ghost in the Machine. Special Agent Rachel Carver arrived at Midtown North Precinct at 4:47 p.m., exactly 3 hours after Detective Torres's call. She moved through the precinct bullpen with the quiet authority of someone who'd spent 15 years navigating the bureaucratic maze of federal law enforcement. Mid-40s, athletic build, dark hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail, she carried a leather briefcase that probably cost more than Torres made in a month. Torres met her at the entrance to the detective squad room. He'd been expecting someone older, someone with the weathered cynicism that came from decades in counterintelligence. Carver looked like she could still pass for a college professor. "Detective Torres?" She extended her hand. Her grip was firm, professional. "Special Agent Carver, FBI Counterintelligence Division. You called about a missing persons case." "Not just missing," Torres said. "Vanished. And he's been living under a stolen identity for at least 4 years. Carver's expression didn't change, but Torres caught the slight narrowing of her eyes. Interest. "Show me what you have." They settled into an empty interview room, windowless, fluorescent lit, smelling faintly of stale coffee and anxiety. Torres spread out his notes, copies of David Harris's employment file, screenshots from security footage, the background check results showing the dead infant's social security number, photos of the Baron Astoria apartment. Carver studied everything in silence, her face unreadable. She had the kind of poker face Torres associated with career agents, people who'd learned not to react, not to telegraph, not to give anything away until they'd processed every angle. Finally, she looked up. "Walk me through it. Start from the beginning." Torres did. He described David Harris's disappearance, the disabled elevator camera, the interview with staff members who knew nothing about the man they'd worked alongside for years, the apartment that felt more like a stage set than a home, the Social Security number belonging to a child who died in 1987. When he finished, Carver sat back in her chair, fingers steepled beneath her chin. "You were right to call us," she said quietly. "This isn't a missing person. This is an operative." "Operative?" Torres felt a chill run down his spine. "You mean like a spy?" "I mean someone working under deep cover. Could be foreign intelligence, Russian SVR, Chinese MSS, maybe Israeli Mossad. Could be one of ours, CIA running a domestic operation they're not supposed to run, or even another federal agency we don't know about." She paused. "Or it could be private sector, corporate espionage. There are firms that specialize in this kind of long-term infiltration." Torres absorbed that. "Why Trump Tower?" "That's the question." Carver pulled out her phone, typed quickly. "Trump Tower isn't just expensive real estate. It's a hub. Foreign oligarchs parking money in Manhattan, business people with ties to foreign governments, politicians using it as a secondary residence. If you wanted to monitor high-value targets, you couldn't pick a better location." So David Harris, whoever he really is, was watching someone. "Almost certainly." Carver's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowned. "I'm pulling building records now. We need to know who was living on those residential floors during the time Harris worked there. Cross-reference with our watch lists, see if anyone pops." Torres felt the case slipping away from him. This happened sometimes. A case started in his lap, then the feds swooped in, and it became classified, need to know, above his pay grade. But Carver surprised him. "I'll need your help with this," she said, meeting his eyes. "You know the building, the staff, the patterns. I'm good at analysis, but you're good at people. We work this together." Torres nodded slowly. "What do you need?" "First, I need to see that apartment. Then I want to review every second of security footage from the past 6 months. If Harris was documenting something, he would have had a system. Patterns in his behavior we can decode." "He went to the basement every night around 4 a.m., Torres said. "Like clockwork." Carver's eyes sharpened. "Show me." By 7 p.m., they'd commandeered a conference room at Trump Tower, convincing building management that cooperation was preferable to a warrant. Richard Chen, the building manager, hovered nervously as they set up laptops and external hard drives to copy months of security footage. "Is David in some kind of trouble?" Chen asked. "Because if this is about immigration status or—" "Mr. Chen," Carver interrupted, her voice polite but final. "I need you to provide us with a complete list of residents on floors 56 through 60 for the past 5 years. Names, countries of origin, dates of occupancy. Can you do that?" Chen swallowed. "I'll need to check with our legal department." Carver pulled out her phone, showed him something on the screen. Whatever it was made Chen go pale. "I'll get you that list," he said quietly, and left. Torres glanced at Carver. "What did you show him?" "A national security letter. Means he can't refuse, and he can't tell anyone we were here." She turned back to the laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. "Let's see what your ghost was up to." They pulled up 6 months of footage showing David Harris's 4 a.m. trips to the basement. Carver had Torres explain the pattern. Every night Harris would leave his post, take the service elevator to the basement, disappear from view for 5 to 10 minutes, then return. "He's not going to the storage rooms," Torres said. "We checked. Nothing was moved, nothing was missing." "So what's he doing down there for 10 minutes every night?" Carver leaned closer to the screen, scrubbing through footage frame by frame. Torres had been wondering the same thing. "The basement has maintenance areas, mechanical rooms, electrical systems, and server rooms," Carver said suddenly. "Buildings like this, they keep their digital infrastructure in climate-controlled rooms in the basement. Security camera feeds, building automation systems, maybe even resident networks." Torres felt the pieces clicking together. "You think he was accessing the servers?" "I think he was copying data." Carver pulled up a schematic of the building, highlighting the basement level. "Look, there's a data center here, about 50 feet from where the service elevator opens. If Harris had the right equipment, a portable storage drive, Wi-Fi interceptor, something small he could carry in his pocket, he could access those servers, download whatever he wanted, and be back upstairs before anyone noticed." "What would he be downloading?" "Security footage, for one thing. He'd want to know who was coming and going, who was meeting whom, what patterns emerged over time." Carver paused, thinking. "But that's not all. High-end residential buildings like this, residents have smart home systems, digital locks, climate control, lighting, all networked, all potentially accessible from a central server." Torres understood immediately. He was monitoring the residents from inside their own apartments. Exactly. No bugs to plant, no break-ins to risk. Just tap into the building's existing infrastructure and siphon off the data. That's— Torres struggled for the word. "That's terrifying. That's tradecraft." Carver's expression was grim. "Whoever trained Harris knew what they were doing. This is sophisticated work." She pulled out her phone again, made a call. "It's Carver. I need a tech team at Trump Tower, basement level, ASAP. Possible server intrusion, data exfiltration. Yes, I know what time it is. Thank you." She hung up, turned back to Torres. "We'll sweep the server room tonight. See if Harris left any traces." Torres checked his watch. "It's almost 8 p.m. Don't your tech people have families?" Carver gave him a tired smile. "Welcome to counterintelligence, Detective. We work when the bad guys work, and the bad guys never sleep." While they waited for the tech team, Carver pulled up the resident list Chen had reluctantly provided. She projected it onto the conference room wall, and Torres felt his jaw drop. Floor 58 alone read like a guest list for a geopolitical summit. Unit 5801, Viktor Kravchenko, Russian national oil and gas magnate, net worth estimated at $2.1 billion. Multiple properties worldwide. Known associate of Russian government officials. Unit 5803, David Holloway, American hedge fund manager, specializing in emerging markets. Multiple SEC complaints, none leading to charges. Unit 5805, Chen Wei, Chinese national, CEO of tech conglomerate with ties to Beijing, listed as business consultant on visa applications. Unit 5807, periodically rented by Senator James McGregor, DNY, during congressional sessions. Also used by various foreign dignitaries as temporary residents. And that was just one floor. Floors 56, 57, 59, and 60 showed similar patterns. Ultra-wealthy individuals with complex international connections, many with ties to foreign governments or controversial business dealings. "Jesus," Torres breathed. "This building is an intelligence goldmine." "Exactly," Carver said, "which is why Harris was here. Question is, whose intelligence was he gathering?" She pulled up another screen, FBI watch lists, cross-referenced with the resident names. Red flags lit up like a Christmas tree. Kravchenko, flagged for possible money laundering connections, suspected of moving Russian oligarch funds through shell companies. Holloway, under investigation for insider trading involving foreign nationals. Chen Wei, on a State Department watch list for potential technology transfer violations. Senator McGregor, clean officially, but his office had been investigated 3 years ago for possible FARA violations, failing to register as a foreign agent. Investigation closed without charges, but suspicions remained. "Everyone in this building is dirty," Torres said. "Not everyone, but enough." Carver zoomed in on the timeline. "Harris started working here in January 2015. That's 4 years and 2 months of daily access. 4 years of watching, listening, documenting. And then, on March 14, 2019, he walks into an elevator and disappears." "Why?" Torres asked. "Why disappear now? What changed?" Carver stared at the screen, thinking. Either he got what he came for, or someone figured out who he was. Either way, his cover was blown. Time to extract. Torres's phone buzzed. Text from the precinct. DNA results from the toothbrush in David Harris's apartment. He opened the file, read quickly, felt his stomach drop. "What is it?" Carver asked. "DNA came back. No matches in any database. Criminal, military, government employee, nothing." Torres looked up at her. "Whoever David Harris really is, he's never been fingerprinted, never been arrested, never served in the military, never worked for any government agency that keeps DNA records." "Or," Carver said slowly, "his real DNA was scrubbed from all those databases a long time ago. Deep cover operatives, the really deep ones, they erase you. No prints, no DNA, no digital footprint. You become a ghost before you even start the mission. So we have no way to identify him? Not through conventional means." Carver closed the laptop, stood. "But we have something better. We have his work. 4 years of surveillance data he collected from this building. If we can recover what he was after, we can figure out who sent him." A knock at the door. Richard Chen poked his head in, looking even more nervous than before. "Agent Carver, there's a problem." "What kind of problem?" "The superintendent just called from the basement. He was doing a routine check of the mechanical systems and—" Chen hesitated. One of the server room access panels is open. It shouldn't be. It's supposed to be locked. Carver and Torres exchanged glances. They were both thinking the same thing. Either Harris had left the server room compromised when he disappeared, or someone else had been down there recently. Someone who might still be there. Carver drew her service weapon from the holster at her hip, checked the magazine. "Show us." The basement of Trump Tower was a different world at night. The fluorescent lights cast harsh, sterile shadows across concrete floors. Exposed pipes ran along the ceiling, dripping condensation that pooled in corners. The air smelled of machine oil and ozone, the faint hum of HVAC systems providing a constant background drone. Chen led them through a maze of corridors to a heavy steel door marked "Authorized Personnel Only, Server Room A." The door was slightly ajar, a sliver of cool blue light spilling through the gap. Carver held up a hand, signaling Torres to stop. She moved forward silently, weapon ready, using her foot to push the door open wider. Inside, the server room was a cathedral of technology. Floor-to-ceiling racks of blinking servers, fiber-optic cables snaking between them. The air kept at precisely 65 degrees by industrial air conditioning units. The lights were dimmed to conserve energy, giving everything a twilight quality. And at the far end of the room, sitting cross-legged on the floor with a laptop open in front of him, was a young man in his 20s. Hoodie, headphones, completely absorbed in whatever was on his screen. He didn't notice them until Carver's voice cut through the mechanical hum. "FBI, hands where I can see them." The young man jumped, nearly knocking over his laptop. His eyes went wide, panic flooding his face. "Whoa, whoa, whoa! I work here. I'm IT. I'm supposed to be here." "Slowly," Carver commanded. "Stand up, hands behind your head." The man complied, moving with exaggerated slowness. Torres stepped forward, did a quick pat-down. No weapons, just a wallet, phone, and security badge. Torres checked the badge. "Tyler Morrison, IT Systems Administrator." He looked at Carver. "He's legit." Carver lowered her weapon, but didn't holster it. "Mr. Morrison, what are you doing here at 8 p.m.? "Maintenance," Tyler said, voice shaking. "We run diagnostics after hours, so we don't interfere with building operations. I was checking the logs, and I found something weird." "Weird how?" Tyler gestured to his laptop, still open on the floor. "Someone's been accessing these servers remotely, for months, maybe years. I only caught it because they got sloppy last week, left a back door open." Carver and Torres moved closer, looking at the screen. Lines of code scrolled past, incomprehensible to Torres, but clearly meaningful to Carver. "Show me," she said. Tyler knelt back down, fingers flying across the keyboard. "See this? Unauthorized access point. Installed? Jesus, installed 4 years ago. It's been dormant most of the time, but it activates every night around 4 a.m., stays active for about 10 minutes, then shuts down again." 4 a.m., Torres repeated. The exact time David Harris came to the basement every night. "Whoever did this was good," Tyler continued, oblivious to the implications. "Really good. They created a virtual tunnel through our firewall, routed it through 3 proxy servers, and masked the activity as routine system maintenance. If I hadn't been specifically looking for anomalies, I never would have found it." "What were they accessing?" Carver asked. Tyler pulled up another window. "Security camera feeds, for sure. Resident network activity. Building access logs, every time someone used their keycard, every time an elevator moved, every delivery that came through the lobby." He paused. "And this is the really creepy part. Smart home data. Thermostats, door locks, lighting systems. If a resident had their apartment connected to the building network, this back door could see everything." Torres felt sick. David Harris hadn't just been watching the building's exterior. He'd been inside every apartment, digitally, monitoring conversations, tracking movements, building a comprehensive picture of every resident's life. "Can you trace where the data was being sent?" Carver asked. Tyler shook his head. "Whoever set this up used military-grade encryption and routed everything through the dark web. It would take months to unravel, and even then, we'd probably hit dead ends." "But you can shut it down?" "Already did. The moment I found it, I severed the connection." Tyler looked between them, finally understanding the gravity of what he'd stumbled into. "Who did this? And why?" Carver didn't answer. She was staring at the screen, her expression unreadable. Finally, she turned to Torres. "Your missing person? He wasn't just some guy working a night job. He was running a long-term surveillance operation inside one of the most sensitive buildings in Manhattan. And whoever he was working for now has 4 years of data on some of the most powerful people in the world." Torres felt the weight of it settling over him. This wasn't just a missing persons case anymore. This was international espionage, played out in the shadows of New York City's most famous tower. "We need to find him," he said quietly. "We need to find out what he took," Carver corrected. "Because whatever it was, it's valuable enough to spend 4 years gathering, and people don't just walk away from operations like this unless they've accomplished their mission." She pulled out her phone, made another call. When she spoke, her voice was calm but urgent. "This is Carver. I need the cyber division at Trump Tower immediately. We have a compromised network, possible data exfiltration spanning 4 years, and I need authorization to expand this investigation to counterintelligence priority 1. A pause as she listened. "Yes, sir. I understand the implications. But if this data ends up in the wrong hands, Russian, Chinese, hell, even a whistleblower organization, we're looking at a diplomatic nightmare. Maybe worse." She hung up, turned back to Torres and Tyler. "No one talks about what happened here tonight. Not to building management, not to residents, not to anyone. This investigation is now classified. Mr. Morrison, you'll be contacted by federal agents tomorrow to review your findings and ensure the system is secure. Detective Torres, you're with me. We have a long night ahead." As they left the server room, Torres glanced back at Tyler, who sat frozen in front of his laptop, only now realizing he'd stumbled into something far bigger than a simple IT problem. In the hallway, Torres turned to Carver. "What now?" "Now we dig into David Harris's life, every second of those 4 years. Who he talked to, where he went, what patterns we can find. Because somewhere in all that data, there's a clue to who he really was, and where he went when he disappeared." They walked through the basement corridors in silence, the hum of servers and machinery following them like a mechanical heartbeat. And somewhere out there, Torres knew, David Harris, or whoever he really was watching. Always watching. The man who never was, but who had seen everything. Chapter 3. The Oligarch's Secret. The interview room on the 58th floor of Trump Tower smelled of expensive cologne and barely concealed hostility. Viktor Kravchenko sat across from Agent Carver and Detective Torres, his posture relaxed, but his eyes calculating. Mid-60s, silver hair swept back from a broad forehead, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Torres's annual salary. His lawyer, a sharp-faced woman in her 40s named Svetlana Petrova, sat beside him, legal pad open, pen poised to object at the slightest provocation. It was 10 a.m., March 16, 2019. 2 days since David Harris had disappeared. 2 days of Carver and Torres working around the clock, pulling together everything they could find on the residents of floors 56 through 60. And now they were starting with the biggest fish. "Mr. Kravchenko," Carver began, her voice professionally neutral, "thank you for agreeing to speak with us." Kravchenko smiled, revealing teeth too white and too straight to be natural. "Of course. I am always happy to cooperate with American law enforcement. Democracy, transparency, these are values I admire greatly." His English was precise, carrying only a trace of Russian accent. A man who'd spent decades moving between Moscow, London, and New York, comfortable in all three. "We're investigating the disappearance of a building employee," Carver continued. "David Harris. Did you know him? The concierge?" Kravchenko shrugged. "I may have seen him. Night shift, yes. I keep unusual hours sometimes, business calls from Europe, Asia, but I cannot say I knew him. We did not socialize." Torres watched Kravchenko carefully. The man's body language was textbook casual, leaning back in his chair, hands folded loosely in his lap, face open and cooperative. But his eyes never stopped moving, flicking between Carver and Torres, assessing, calculating. "When was the last time you saw him?" Torres asked. "I could not say. A week ago? 2 weeks? These people, they do their jobs, I do mine. I do not pay attention to staff unless there is a problem, and there was never a problem." "Where were you on the night of March 13th, going into the early morning of March 14th? Petrova, the lawyer, spoke up immediately. "My client has no obligation to provide his whereabouts without—" "It's fine, Svetlana." Kravchenko waved a dismissive hand. "I have nothing to hide. March 13th. I was here, in my apartment, working. I had video conference with partners in Moscow at midnight, 9 a.m. their time. Then I read reports, answered emails, went to bed around 3 a.m. He pulled out his phone, tapped through screens. "Here, calendar shows the meeting. I can provide call logs if you wish." Carver made a note. "Did you see or hear anything unusual that night? Any activity in the hallways, strange sounds, anything out of the ordinary?" "No, nothing." "Mr. Kravchenko," Carver said, changing tack, "are you aware that building security systems were compromised? That someone had been monitoring resident activities for the past 4 years?" For the first time, something flickered behind Kravchenko's eyes. Not surprise, more like confirmation of a suspicion. "Compromised how? Security cameras, building access logs, smart home systems? Someone was collecting data on everyone living on these floors." Kravchenko exchanged a quick glance with his lawyer. When he spoke again, his voice had cooled. "And you believe this was the concierge? David Harris? We're exploring all possibilities." "Then I suggest you explore very carefully, Agent Carver." Kravchenko leaned forward slightly, and suddenly the genial oligarch facade cracked, revealing something harder beneath. "People who live in buildings like this, we do not live here by accident. We live here because we value privacy, security, the knowledge that our business, our private business, remains private. If that privacy was violated," he spread his hands, "there would be consequences." "Are you threatening—" Torres started, but Kravchenko cut him off with a sharp laugh. "Threatening? No, detective. I am explaining reality. If someone was spying on me, on my business dealings, that person has made powerful enemies. Russian enemies, Chinese enemies, American enemies. Pick your nationality. We are all here, on these floors, conducting business that some governments would prefer remained secret." He sat back. "So, yes, if this David Harris was running surveillance operation, I am not surprised he disappeared. I would be more surprised if he hadn't." "Do you know who might have wanted him gone?" Carver pressed. "No, but I suggest you look at everyone on your list. Any one of us could have reason to silence spy." He paused. Or perhaps he wasn't silenced. Perhaps he completed his mission and left. Israeli intelligence does this. Mossad. They insert agent for years, collect data, then extract. Very professional, very clean. Torres felt his frustration mounting. Kravchenko was too smooth, too prepared. This wasn't his first interrogation. You seem remarkably calm about the possibility that your private life was being monitored for 4 years. Kravchenko smiled coldly. Detective, I assume I am always being monitored. FSB in Russia, FBI here in America, MI6 in London. Everyone wants to know what Viktor Kravchenko is doing with his money. So yes, I am calm, because I am always careful. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket. Now, if there is nothing else, I have meeting. We may need to speak with you again, Carver said. Of course, through my lawyer. Kravchenko nodded to Petrova, who snapped her legal pad shut with finality. At the door, he paused. A word of advice, Agent Carver? You are looking for Ghost, and ghosts, by definition, do not wish to be found. Perhaps it is wiser to ask not where this ghost has gone, but what secrets he took with him when he left. The door closed behind him, leaving Carver and Torres alone in the suddenly too quiet room. Well, Torres said after a moment, that was illuminating. He knows something, Carver said quietly. Did you see his eyes when I mentioned the surveillance? He wasn't surprised. He suspected. You think he figured out David was watching him? Maybe. Or maybe he has his own people watching, and they spotted David's operation. Carver pulled out her tablet, began making notes. We need to pull Kravchenko's financial records, communication logs, everything. If David was specifically targeting him... Her phone rang. She glanced at the screen, frowned. It's my office, she answered. Carver. Yes. When? I see. Send me everything. She hung up, her expression grim. What? Torres asked. The New York Times just published a story. Leaked documents showing financial ties between Russian oligarchs and Senator James McGregor. Campaign donations laundered through shell companies, meetings in Moscow that were never disclosed. The whole thing. Torres felt his stomach drop. McGregor, Unit 5807. He was on David Harris's watch list. Exactly, and someone just dumped 4 years of documentation to the press. Carver stood, already moving toward the door. David Harris didn't just disappear. He released what he found. This was the endgame. By noon, the story had exploded across every news outlet in the country. Senator James McGregor, Democrat from New York, decorated military veteran, vocal critic of Russian interference in American elections, caught taking money from the very oligarchs he publicly condemned. The documents were detailed, damning, and apparently authentic. Campaign finance records, bank transfers, emails discussing contributions and introductions, and they'd all been gathered from Trump Tower's compromised network. Torres and Carver sat in the commandeered conference room, watching cable news on a wall-mounted TV while simultaneously reading the Times article on their laptops. The reporter who'd broken the story, a veteran investigative journalist named Sarah Chen, cited only a confidential source with access to financial records, but the timing was impossible to ignore. David Harris leaked this, Torres said. Has to be. Or whoever David was working for leaked it. Carver scrolled through the documents, which the Times had published in full. Look at the metadata. These files were extracted from Trump Tower's server system between January 2015 and March 2019. Every email McGregor sent from his apartment, every phone call logged through the building's VoIP system, every visitor who came to Unit 5807. How did David get McGregor's private emails? Smart home integration. McGregor probably had his laptop connected to the building Wi-Fi. Once David had access to the network, he could intercept everything. Carver highlighted a particularly damning exchange. This one, January 2017. McGregor emails someone at Kravchenko's shell company discussing a $500,000 contribution to the super PAC. 2 weeks later, McGregor introduces legislation favorable to Russian aluminum imports. Quid pro quo, clear as day. Torres leaned back, processing. So David spent 4 years building a case against McGregor. But why? Who was he working for? That's what we need to find out. Carver's phone buzzed again. Another call from FBI headquarters. Carver. Yes, sir. I'm aware. I understand the sensitivity. Yes, Senator McGregor's office has been uncooperative. That's not surprising, given... Understood. We'll proceed carefully. She hung up, rubbed her temples. McGregor's lawyer is threatening to sue the Times, the FBI, and anyone else involved for violating his privacy. Meanwhile, the Senate Ethics Committee has opened an investigation, and half of Congress is calling for his resignation. Good, Torres said. Guy's a traitor. Maybe, but he's also a sitting U.S. senator with powerful friends. This investigation just got a lot more complicated. Carver closed her laptop. We need to talk to McGregor directly. He's here in the building. His office confirmed he's staying in Unit 5807 while Congress is in recess. You think he'll talk to us? He doesn't have a choice. If he refuses, it looks like an admission of guilt. They took the elevator to the 58th floor, the same floor where Kravchenko lived. Unit 5807 was at the opposite end of the hallway, prime real estate with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. Torres knocked. The door opened immediately, revealing a harried-looking young woman in a pantsuit, probably a staffer. You can't be here. The senator isn't giving interviews. Carver held up her badge. FBI Special Agent Carver and Detective Torres, NYPD. We need to speak with Senator McGregor about an active investigation. The woman's face went pale. I'll check. She closed the door. Torres heard urgent whispers inside, then footsteps. When the door reopened, Senator James McGregor stood there himself. Early 60s, gray hair, square jaw that had played well on campaign posters, but today he looked haggard, his tie loosened, shirt wrinkled, eyes bloodshot. A man whose carefully constructed political career was crumbling in real time. Make it quick, McGregor said, not inviting them in. My lawyers are on their way. We're investigating the disappearance of David Harris, a building employee, Carver said. We believe he may have been responsible for the leak of your private communications. McGregor's jaw tightened. Then you're looking for him. Good. When you find him, I'll sue him into bankruptcy for violating federal wiretapping laws. Did you know Mr. Harris? Torres asked. No, I don't know any of the staff here. I'm barely in this apartment, maybe 10 days a month when Congress is in session. When was the last time you were here? 2 weeks ago. I've been in Washington since then. Came back yesterday when this story broke. He gestured vaguely at the city beyond. My lawyers are claiming the documents are fabricated. Deepfakes, Russian disinformation. Are they? Carver asked pointedly. McGregor's face flushed. I'm not answering that without my attorney present. Senator, if you've been the target of a foreign intelligence operation, the FBI can help protect. I don't need protection, McGregor snapped. I need whoever did this found and prosecuted. 4 years of surveillance? 4 years of illegal monitoring? That's not journalism, Agent Carver. That's espionage. Were you aware that Viktor Kravchenko lives on this floor? Torres asked. That you've been in close proximity to a Russian oligarch under FBI investigation? Something flickered across McGregor's face. Fear, maybe, or calculation. I'm aware of Mr. Kravchenko's residence. I've met him at building functions. That doesn't mean I'm in business with him. The documents suggest otherwise. The documents are lies. McGregor's voice rose, then caught himself. He продолжай. Продолжаю текст с того места, где остановился. Took a breath. Look, I can't talk to you without my lawyer, but I will say this. Whoever David Harris really is, whatever organization he's working for, they've committed federal crimes. When you find him, I want him prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And if he was exposing corruption? Carver asked quietly. McGregor met her eyes. Then he should have gone through proper channels, not destroyed my life with stolen information. He closed the door, leaving Carver and Torres standing in the hallway. Torres exhaled slowly. That man is terrified. Of what? Us? The press? Or something else? Maybe all three. Torres pulled out his phone, checked the news. Twitter's going insane. McGregor resign is trending. His own party is distancing themselves. This isn't just a scandal, it's a political assassination. Executed by a ghost, Carver murmured. David Harris, whoever he really is, just ended a senator's career without firing a shot. That takes planning, resources, patience. And access, Torres added. 4 years of perfect positioning. He wasn't some random operative. He was specifically placed here to go after McGregor. Carver nodded slowly. Which means whoever sent David knew McGregor was dirty. They knew he was using Trump Tower as a meeting place with Kravchenko. They knew there were secrets worth exposing. This wasn't a fishing expedition. This was a targeted operation. So who sent him? FBI? CIA? If it was FBI or CIA, I'd know about it. Domestic surveillance operations require authorization, oversight, paper trails. This operation was dark. No official sanction, no bureaucratic fingerprints. Carver started walking back toward the elevators. Which leaves foreign intelligence, private contractors, or what? Or a whistleblower organization. Someone like WikiLeaks, but more sophisticated. There are groups that specialize in this, inserting long-term assets, collecting evidence, then releasing it all at once for maximum impact. They rode the elevator down in silence. When they reached the lobby, Torres's phone buzzed. Text from Officer Chen at the precinct. Detective, you need to see this. Someone left a package at the front desk. Addressed to you. Torres showed Carver the message. Package for me? Here at Trump Tower? They hurried to the building's main security desk, where the head of security, an ex-cop named Frank Morrison, was waiting with a small cardboard box. Found this 20 minutes ago, Morrison said. Just sitting on the counter. Nobody saw who left it. You check it for explosives? Torres asked. Scanned it. It's clean. Well, you'll see. Carver and Torres pulled on latex gloves. Torres carefully opened the box. Inside, nestled in bubble wrap, was a flip phone, old model, probably a burner, and a folded piece of paper. Torres unfolded the paper. The message was typed, not handwritten. Detective Torres, you're asking the right questions, but you're looking in the wrong place. McGregor was never the primary target. He was collateral damage. If you want to understand why I was at Trump Tower for 4 years, look at who benefits most from McGregor's downfall. The truth isn't about what I took from this building. It's about what I left behind. A friend. Torres read it twice, then handed it to Carver. She studied the note, her expression unreadable. What I left behind, she repeated. What does that mean? Torres picked up the flip phone, powered it on. It took a moment to boot up, ancient technology by 2019 standards. When the screen lit up, there was a single text message in the drafts folder. No name attached, just a number Torres didn't recognize. The message read, "Server room A, behind the cooling unit. Follow the wire." "It's a clue," Torres said. "He left something in the server room." Carver was already moving toward the elevators. "Let's go." 5 minutes later, they were back in server room A, the same place they'd found Tyler Morrison 2 days ago. The room hummed with the constant white noise of cooling fans and spinning hard drives. Carver led the way to the massive cooling unit in the corner, an industrial air conditioning system that kept the servers at optimal temperature. "Behind it," Torres said, shining his flashlight into the narrow gap between the unit and the wall. Carver knelt, reaching into the space. Her fingers found something, a wire, just like the message had said, running along the baseboard. She followed it, hand over hand, until she reached a small object taped to the back of the cooling unit. She pulled it free. It was a portable hard drive, no bigger than a deck of cards, wrapped in waterproof plastic. "Got it," she said, standing. The hard drive was labeled with a single word written in black marker, "Chessboard." Torres frowned. "Chessboard? What does that mean?" "It's a term used in intelligence operations," Carver said quietly. "It means the players, the pieces, the game, everything mapped out." She turned the drive over in her hands. This is what David was really after, not just McGregor's corruption. Something bigger. They took the drive back to the conference room, connected it to Carver's laptop. It was encrypted, but the password prompt was a simple challenge. Response: "What do ghosts collect?" Carver thought for a moment, then typed, "Secrets." The drive unlocked. Inside were thousands of files. Surveillance footage, financial records, emails, phone transcripts, photographs. But they weren't just about McGregor. They were about everyone. Kravchenko's meetings with Russian government officials, Holloway's insider trading schemes coordinated with foreign nationals, Chen Wei's technology transfers to Beijing, McGregor's corrupt relationship with Kravchenko. But there was more. Connections between them, patterns of coordination, a web of corruption, espionage, and money laundering that spanned 3 countries and involved dozens of players. And at the center of it all, linking everything together, was Trump Tower itself. A neutral meeting ground where oligarchs, politicians, and business people from hostile nations could conduct business away from prying eyes. Or so they thought. Carver pulled up a document titled Final Analysis, Operation Chessboard. It was dated March 13, 2019, the day before David Harris disappeared. Torres read over her shoulder. 4 years of surveillance confirms Trump Tower functions as international nexus for money laundering, intelligence sharing, and corruption. Primary targets: Senator James McGregor, U.S., Viktor Kravchenko, Russia, Chen Wei, China, David Holloway, facilitator. Secondary targets: 47 additional individuals across 12 countries. Phase 1, infiltration, complete. Phase 2, data collection, complete. Phase 3, evidence compilation, complete. Phase 4, public disclosure, in progress. McGregor documents released to media March 14th. Remaining evidence will be released in stages to maximize impact and prevent suppression. Phase 5, extraction, initiated March 14th, 04:23 hours. Mission status, success. Operator status, safe. Torres sat back, stunned. He planned the whole thing, down to the minute. He didn't just disappear, Carver said softly. He orchestrated his exit as the final move in a 4-year operation. And leaving this drive behind? That's his insurance policy. If anything happens to him, if the story gets buried, all of this comes out. But who is he? Torres asked. Who trained him? Who sent him? Carver scrolled through more files, searching for anything that might identify David Harris's true identity or his employer's. But there was nothing. No organizational letterhead, no agency markings, no names beyond the targets themselves. And then, at the bottom of the directory, she found one last file, a video labeled simply Message. She double-clicked. The video opened, showing a dimly lit room, maybe a hotel, maybe an apartment, impossible to tell. And sitting in front of the camera, face partially shadowed but unmistakably recognizable from 4 years of security footage, was David Harris. He looked different, more relaxed, as if a mask had been removed, revealing the person beneath. When he spoke, his voice was calm, measured, but carried an intensity that had never been present in his interactions as a concierge. "Detective Torres, Agent Carver, if you're watching this, it means you found what I left behind. Good. That means you're smart enough to understand what comes next. My name isn't David Harris. That identity died in 1987, and I borrowed it for 4 years to do a job that needed doing. Who I really am doesn't matter. What matters is the evidence. Everything on this drive is authentic. Everything can be verified, and everything will eventually become public. You're probably wondering why. Why spend 4 years in a building, watching people, collecting their secrets? The answer is simple. Because no one else would. The FBI knows about Kravchenko, the CIA knows about Chen Wei, but they can't touch them. Diplomatic immunity, political calculations, bureaucratic paralysis. So someone had to act. Someone had to prove that corruption at this level isn't untouchable. McGregor was the opening move. The others will follow. One by one, the truth comes out. And when it does, ask yourselves, was this justice or espionage? Because from where I'm standing, they look the same. Don't try to find me. You won't. I'm already gone, erased, rebuilt somewhere else under another name. But know this, I'll be watching. And if anyone tries to bury what I've uncovered, the full archive goes public. All of it. No redactions, no protection for anyone. The game is over. The pieces are captured. Checkmate. The video ended. David Harris, or whoever he really was, leaned forward and turned off the camera. The screen went black. Carver and Torres sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Torres spoke. He's a vigilante, an ideological operative. Or a patriot, Carver said quietly. Depends on your perspective. The FBI will want this drive. All of it. They'll get it. But David's right. If we try to suppress any of this, it'll leak anyway. He's built a dead man's switch into the whole operation. Carver closed the laptop. We're not investigating a missing person anymore, Torres. We're managing the fallout from the most sophisticated whistleblowing operation in American history. Torres looked at the blank screen where David Harris's face had been moments before. A ghost, a phantom, a man who'd never existed, who'd spent 4 years living a lie to expose the lies of others. Do you think we'll ever find him? Torres asked. Carver shook her head slowly. No, I don't. And honestly, I'm not sure we should. Somewhere in the world, David Harris, if that had ever been his name, was starting over. New face, new identity, new mission, perhaps. A ghost among ghosts, forever watching, forever collecting secrets. And Trump Tower, golden and gleaming above Fifth Avenue, would never be quite the same. Epilogue, 6 months later, September 2019. Manhattan had changed since March, but not in ways most people would notice. The leaves in Central Park turned golden and red. Tourists still crowded Fifth Avenue, taking selfies in front of Trump Tower's gleaming facade. Coffee shops churned out pumpkin spice lattes. Life, as always, moved forward. But for Detective Michael Torres, walking into Midtown North Precinct on a cool Tuesday morning, the past 6 months felt like a lifetime compressed into weeks. He'd aged, somehow. Not physically, though the gray at his temples had spread, but in the way he looked at the world. Once he'd believed in systems, rules, the idea that justice, however slow, eventually arrived. Now he wasn't so sure. He poured himself coffee from the break room, nodding to officers coming off night shift, and settled at his desk. The morning briefing wouldn't start for another hour, which gave him time to catch up on paperwork. Routine cases, domestic disputes, petty theft, the mundane crimes that filled a detective's calendar between the headline grabbers. But his mind kept wandering back to Trump Tower, to David Harris, to the man who'd never existed. The fallout from Operation Chessboard had been swift and brutal. Senator James McGregor resigned on April 3, 2019, exactly 3 weeks after the New York Times published his leaked documents. He'd held a tearful press conference claiming he was the victim of illegal surveillance by foreign operatives, but the evidence was ironclad. Financial records don't lie. Neither do emails discussing quid pro quo arrangements with Russian oligarchs. McGregor now faced multiple federal investigations. His political career was over. Some called it justice. Others called it a witch hunt. Torres called it inevitable. Viktor Kravchenko had been smarter. The day after McGregor resigned, Kravchenko boarded his private jet and flew to Moscow. He hadn't returned. The U.S. government had frozen his American assets and issued warrants, but Russia didn't extradite its billionaires. Kravchenko was beyond reach, living in a mansion outside Moscow, still wealthy, still connected, still untouchable. Torres had watched an interview with Kravchenko on Russian state television 2 months ago. The oligarch sat in an ornate study, sipping tea, calmly explaining how he'd been persecuted by the American deep state for his support of Russian-American friendship. He never mentioned David Harris, never acknowledged the surveillance, just smiled that cold, knowing smile and disappeared back into the shadows of Russian power. Chen Wei, the Chinese tech executive from Unit 5805, had fared worse. Beijing arrested him in May on charges of corruption and abuse of power, the Chinese government's catch-all accusation for anyone who became politically inconvenient. Torres suspected the Chinese authorities had known about Chen's technology transfers all along, but waited until the Trump Tower leaks made him a liability. Chen was now serving 15 years in a Chinese prison. His company had been nationalized. His family had disowned him. David Holloway, the hedge fund manager who'd facilitated connections between Kravchenko and McGregor, had struck a deal with federal prosecutors. Full cooperation in exchange for reduced charges. He was currently testifying before a grand jury, spilling secrets about dozens of other corrupt deals, other politicians, other oligarchs. Torres had read the sealed indictments. They went deep, deeper than anyone had imagined. And through it all, the question remained. Who was David Harris? Agent Rachel Carver had spent months trying to answer that. The FBI's counterintelligence division pulled in favors from every allied intelligence service, MI6, Mossad, BND, DGSE, but came up empty. The DNA from David's apartment matched no database. His fingerprints existed nowhere. The man had been professionally erased, which meant he'd been trained by someone with resources and reach. Carver's best guess. A private intelligence firm, maybe one founded by ex-CIA or ex-Mossad operatives who'd gone freelance. Someone had funded David's 4-year operation, paid his rent, provided equipment, maintained his cover. That took money, organization, patience. But whoever they were, they'd vanished just as completely as David had. Torres's phone buzzed. Text from Carver. "Coffee? Usual place?" He replied, 20 minutes. They met at a diner 3 blocks from the precinct, same place they'd been meeting every few weeks since March. Carver slid into the booth across from him, looking tired but professional as always. She'd been promoted, Deputy Director of Counterintelligence now, but the title hadn't changed her. "You look like hell," she said by way of greeting. "Thanks, you too," she smiled faintly. "Long night." We just got word that the chessboard archive released another batch of documents. 3 more senators, 2 cabinet officials, and a Supreme Court clerk, all tied to foreign money. Torres whistled low. "David's still working. Or his people are. The releases are staged, calculated. Maximum political damage, timed to coincide with election cycles and confirmation hearings." Carver poured sugar into her coffee. "Whoever set this up, they're playing a long game. McGregor was just the opening move." "You ever wonder if we did the right thing?" Torres asked. "Turning over the chessboard drive to your bosses?" "Every day." Carver stirred her coffee, staring into it. "But what choice did we have? David built a dead man's switch into the whole operation. If we'd tried to suppress it, everything would have leaked anyway. At least this way, the information is being verified, redacted where necessary to protect ongoing investigations." "Redacted," Torres repeated. "You mean censored?" "I mean managed." Carver met his eyes. "Torres, there are things on that drive that could start wars. Intelligence sharing agreements between countries that officially hate each other. Blackmail material on heads of state. David Harris documented everything happening in that building for 4 years. If all of it came out at once, unfiltered, it would be chaos. Maybe chaos is what we need." "Maybe." Carver leaned back. "Or maybe we need to believe that systems can still work, even if they work slowly, even if they're imperfect." They sat in silence for a moment, 2 people who'd seen too much, knew too much, and could never unsee what they'd learned about how power really operated at the highest levels. Finally, Torres pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. Plain white, no return address, postmarked from Lisbon, Portugal. "This came to my apartment yesterday, hand-delivered to my building's front desk." Carver raised an eyebrow. "From him?" "I think so." Inside the envelope was a single postcard. The image on the front showed the view from São Jorge Castle, Lisbon's red rooftops spreading toward the Tagus River, boats dotting the water, the sun setting over the Atlantic. No message on the back, just 3 words written in neat block letters. "Thank you. Keep watching." Carver studied the postcard, then handed it back. "You going to trace it?" "Already did. Dead end. The postcard was mailed from a tourist shop near the castle. Paid in cash. No security footage." Torres slipped it back into the envelope. "He's gone. Really gone." "Good." Carver stood, dropped a $10 bill on the table for her coffee. "Better for everyone if David Harris stays a ghost." "You think he's in Lisbon?" "I think he was in Lisbon long enough to mail that postcard. By now?" She shrugged. "Could be anywhere. Berlin, Tokyo, Buenos Aires. Starting a new operation, building a new identity, watching new targets." She paused at the booth. "You know what scares me, Torres? It's not that David Harris exposed corrupt people. It's that he had to. Because all the official systems, FBI, CIA, Congress, the press, we all knew. We knew about Kravchenko, about McGregor, about all of them, and we did nothing. So David did it for us. David did it because someone has to." Carver pulled on her coat. "And God help us, but I hope there are more like him out there, because we're not doing enough." She left. Torres sat alone in the booth, holding the postcard, thinking about a man he'd never met. A ghost who'd lived among them for 4 years, collecting secrets, watching silently, waiting for the right moment to strike. Thank you. Keep watching. Torres smiled faintly. Yeah, he'd keep watching. What choice did he have? Outside the diner, Manhattan rushed past. Millions of people going about their lives, unaware of the invisible wars being fought in the shadows, unaware that somewhere in the world, ghosts like David Harris were still watching, still documenting, still preparing to expose the next corrupt official, the next crooked deal, the next lie dressed up as truth. Torres pocketed the postcard and walked back to the precinct. He had work to do, cases to solve, a city to protect, and somewhere, in a cafe in Lisbon or Berlin or Tokyo, a man who'd once called himself David Harris sat with a laptop and a cup of coffee, watching a building full of secrets, waiting for the moment to act. The game never really ends. The pieces just move to new squares. And the ghosts? They keep collecting what the powerful thought they could hide. Forever watching, forever waiting, forever exposing the truth that systems fail to reveal.